Up to now, I've been on the main Banda Islands that were occupied by the Dutch. But there was one piece of nutmeg real estate the Dutch hadn't seized. A tiny island taken over by their bitter rivals, the English. Now, the English were in this part of the world for the same reason as the Dutch, to make a fortune from nutmeg. They set up a company to rival the VOC, the English East India Company, which was to become the engine that launched the British Empire. And this was their first target, 10 miles west of Banda. This almost inaccessible speck in the ocean, 2 miles by half a mile wide, was to become the first ever English colony, the island of Rune.
You have no idea how lucky we are. This stretch of sea can be absolutely brutal. And you can see it's low tide at the moment because this spit of land is very exposed and there are waves breaking on that reef, and reefs surround this whole island, and it was the ruin of many an English ship.
The man the company chose to win this island for the crown was an unlikely hero. Captain Nathaniel Courthope was a swashbuckling, fearless adventurer and also a bit of a thief. He'd purloined £600 from the company, been punished for the crime, and was ready to redeem himself on the island of Rune. When Captain Courthope arrived in 1616, he was warned to heed the following advice.
At your arrival at Rune, show yourself courteous and affable, for they are a peevish, perverse, diffident and perfidious people, and apt to take disgust upon small occasions, and are, being moved, more cumbersome than wasps. Wow, I'm looking forward to this welcome. It's so shallow here, we're having to watch for the reef. You're going to try go around that way and then hit the beach. All sand here by the looks of things, so we should be pretty good. Salamat pagi! Well done.
Welcome to Manhattan.
Ah, thank you. What a welcome.
Today, I found the reception to this particular English visitor anything but peevish and diffident. Captain Courthope's negotiations with the locals in broken English and sign language were to change the course of history. By offering them protection against the hated Dutch, he persuaded them to hand over control of the island to the English crown. When news reached King James, he was so ecstatic that he changed his title to King of England, Scotland, Ireland and Rune.
So
You are the leader.
Yeah,
You're very young.
Yeah.
I feel very honoured.
So England in Rune is very famous.
Very famous.
Yes, and then they can back with the people in Rune Island.
Aha.
The pact with the islanders gave England an exclusive export deal with Rune. Courthope set up plantations and filled flotillas of ships with nutmeg, which went directly to England. All this happened under the noses of the infuriated Dutch, and they set out on a 4-year campaign of ferocious battles to destroy Courthope. In the end, the Dutch tricked Captain Courthope into an ambush at sea. He fought for his life, but he was outgunned and outmanned, and finally he was shot. The story goes that he threw himself overboard and was never seen again. The English thorn in the Dutch side was finally removed.
There's little sign that the English were ever here. I mean, there's these few crumbling, rather unloved ruins, but there's no monument. There's nothing that remembers Courthope's brave but futile stand against the Dutch.
But neither is there a memorial to the many islanders who died in a bitter battle between two foreign nations to control the trade of Rune's nutmeg. With Courthope out of the way, the Dutch were now totally in control of the nutmeg trade. But the story doesn't end there. To uncover the next chapter, I need to travel 100 miles across the Banda Sea to the seat of Dutch power in the 17th century, the island of Ambon. Despite their stranglehold on the region and the trade, the Dutch were obsessed with the idea that someone, somewhere, was plotting to oust them. These crumbling walls are all that remain of the once mighty Dutch fort, where many of the Dutch bigwigs hold up, protected by heavily armed soldiers. A handful of Englishmen also lived on the island.
At the time, it numbered just 18, a motley band of merchants and sailors. There was a barber and a tailor. They were all utterly broke and desperate to leave. So they were hardly a threat to anyone. Yet such was the Dutch paranoia that they believed that this little band of bankrupts had a conspiracy to overthrow them.
So the Dutch governor had them thrown in chains, horribly tortured for many days, until they confessed to a conspiracy none of them had any notion of.
And in early 1623, every single one of them was beheaded in front of a baying crowd. Governor General Cohen's master plan of domination by extermination was well on track.
Finally, to add insult to injury, the Dutch sent the English the bill for the cost of the blood-stained velvet from the executioner's block. After the massacre at the fort, it was all-out war between the Dutch and the English, and the locals were stuck in the middle. In 1620, after the death of Captain Courthope, England lost this nutmeg-rich island to Holland. Almost 50 years passed before England's King Charles II took his revenge.
He sent a fleet across the Atlantic in retaliation and took a Dutch-held island called Nieuw Amsterdam. 2 years later, the two sides got together to try and establish some sort of peace, but it looked impossible. The English were demanding Rune back, the Dutch were categorically refusing, and it looked like deadlock until one bright spark said, look, why don't you just hang on to the islands you already have? So the English reluctantly said, okay, we'll keep Nieuw Amsterdam, you, the Dutch, can have Rune. And so that's what they did. The English turned their backs on the Spice Islands, renamed Nieuw Amsterdam, New York, and a whole new period of colonization began.